If you want to take down China, you're going to have to take down China. In fact, you're going to be in front. If you want any deal whatsoever, quit holding out for a multilateral one. That does not allow us to use our diplomatic, military, and economic leverage to the most. This is not the order. You cannot trade guns for butter. We can use guns, we can use butter, and we can use it to get whatever we want from you. But if you want any economic relationship with us, it's going to be a bilateral deal, not that we negotiate, that we impose. And Abi's like, oh, he clearly doesn't mean that, so I'm just going to keep stalling for time. And then all of a sudden, the Americans had to deal with South Korea and Mexico and Canada. And 4 of Japan's 5 largest trading partners were already part of this new post-order system. About a month later, the Japanese started their bilateral talks. They'll probably be finished up later this year. Wow, talk about somebody who's had a crappy last few months. Brexit was always going to end with a hard divorce. There was never going to be a deal. The way the European Union works, if there is ever a big issue, each individual member has veto power. And there is no version of a Brexit divorce agreement that could make Ireland and Spain and the Netherlands and Germany and France and the British Parliament happy. There's no way that this could go except for a hard Brexit, which means the United Kingdom is facing down an economic depression that's going to take 20% off of its headline GDP over the next 3 years. That is unavoidable. That is baked in. And those are the situations in which the United Kingdom is coming to the United States seeking a bilateral trade deal. Now, the last time Britain was in this situation, it was World War II. They were on the ropes versus the Nazis, and FDR got a call from Churchill. And Churchill says, look, if you're not going to get in this fight, at least give us some equipment. And FDR's like, we've got these old, super crappy destroyers that were obsolete when we floated them 25 years ago, that your sailors made fun of. You want those? And Churchill's like, I guess it's better than nothing. Yeah, sure, we'll take those. But they're not free. As payment, we'll take every single military base you have in the Western Hemisphere. Fine. What's the magic word? Please. And for the next 50 years, the United Kingdom was a strategic, subservient nation to the United States. We're going to do that again with this new trade deal because the Brits have no leverage. At a minimum, it's going to cost them the London Financial Center. Well, if there's a world leader out there that does not understand Donald Trump, it's Angela Merkel. She thought she could win him over with a history lesson. I'm like, oh, you did not study ahead for this one. She came in to explain that Germany is in the middle of the Northern European plain, which means that it's got rivals all around it. And the only way that the Germans have ever discovered that they can exist in that environment is to be better. Stronger infrastructure, better educational system, a more advanced workforce, a more sophisticated technological base. But you take anything as big as Germany and you make it as advanced as Germany, and its very existence threatens everyone around it. So European history is this horrible pendulum that swings between periods of extreme German strength, which causes a pan-European alliance to tear them down in a war, and then extreme German weakness, where Central Europe becomes a black hole that sucks everyone in. And she says, Mr. President, do you realize that if you do what you say you're going to do, if you remove the security overwatch that allows us to get past our history and our geography, that's not just the end of NATO, and that's not just the end of the European Union, that's the end of my country. His response, well, I do now. She thought she could just educate him and that would be enough, and that he would continue doing what the United States had been doing for the last 70 years. She missed the transactional nature of American foreign policy beyond the order. So on her way out the door, Donald Trump gave her a parting gift, a bill for services rendered for defending Germany since the 1940s. For all intents and purposes, the American NATO, the American European, the American German relationship died that day, and we've just been going through the motions since. Folks, if the United States has a trade deal with Korea and Mexico and China and Japan and Britain, that's already half of our trade portfolio. That's the end of the Trump administration's ambitions for trade. because that's enough that the US can probably avoid a recession even if the global system burns. I know that's not great for people in this room in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to work really well. We'll get there in a minute. One more country. President Xi, when he finally had his summit last March, called ahead. And he said, I don't want to meet in the White House. I have things I need to say to you that I cannot say in front of the diplomatic corps and the press corps. So they diverted to Mar-a-Lago, where Trump could control the environment. And Xi laid it out. It's like, you control the global security environment, global finance, global energy, the market we have to have access to. We're in a tough time in China. We're financially over-leveraged. We're facing food crises. We're more dependent on you than we ever have been before. And we're in the midst of the most difficult political transition in modern Chinese history, from me to me. Please don't pull the rug out from under me right now. So let's talk about North Korea, about the South China Sea, about cybercrime, about the trade deficit. Let's talk about it all. And we made more progress in the next 11 months than we had in the past 20 years. Was it enough? Oh no, not even close. But it was interesting that Xi felt he had to tip his hand. And if you ever think you've had a bad day, consider President Xi, who has now admitted that the physical and economic security and continuity of his government, of his person, is entirely dependent upon the even-keeled mood of the man on the left. All right, let's talk ag. This is what it looks like outside right now. That's why we're all inside. This is actually really good for agriculture. Winter is one of the best things that can happen to temperate zone agriculture. It's a free bug kill, and it's a free soil regeneration phase for the soil. It's free fertilizer, free pesticide. That's not how it works in Brazil. Brazil's agricultural zone is an area called the Cerrado. It is a tropical prairie, and it has this kind of weird fibrous tree that kind of crowds out the roots of anything else. So if you want to farm the Cerrado, you have to take a bulldozer out there after it rains, chain up these trees, drag them out by the roots, and then spend the next 20 years poisoning the soil with lime until you kill the acid. That leaves you with a soil that's the consistency and nutrient profile of beach sand, which means you have to put 3 and 4 times as much fertilizer per crop that you would here. Not to mention you can never let up with the pesticide because there's never a winter kill. It's the most expensive input cycle for agriculture anywhere in the world. Next problem is geography. This is an elevation map, and that kind of orangish butterfly down there at the bottom, those are mountains that are about the same high as the Appalachian chain. You'll notice in the middle of the butterfly, there's a break. That's the city of Sao Paulo. Think of Brazil like a table that has had 2 legs knocked out, but the high side is on the coast. So any product you ship can't use a navigable waterway. Brazil has none. It has to go by truck to the top of that escarpment and then zigzag down on switchbacks to the coast. Highest transport costs for agriculture in the world. That also changes the political system. Oh yeah, there's the one road. All soy exports, one road. Can you imagine? They get 200-mile traffic jams every harvest season. It's a disaster. Anyway, the social system. Now in the background there, you've got the Copacabana. You want to sip caipirinhas on the beach, this is where you go. But look at the foreground. Concrete block and plywood buildings. These are the favelas. These are Brazil's slums. The reason for the juxtaposition is pretty straightforward. There's so little in Brazil that is easy to develop that the only people who can become wealthy in Brazil are the people who started wealthy and had the money to put in the infrastructure and to terraform the land. Everyone else is dirt poor. This is the most unequal economy in the world and has been for 200 years. An idea from a different angle, how stark it is. Well, guess which industry this inequality problem is the strongest in? Ag. Their farms, on average, are 10 times the size of what they are in the United States, and we're not exactly known for having small farms here. There's no way for a small family farm to even survive, to even begin, because the capital costs are so high up front and continuing. Now, the Brazilians recently elected this dude. This is Bolsonaro. His big claim to fame from his campaign was talking about how the real problem with the Nazis is that they were just too soft on their foes. Won in a landslide. Go Brazil. Granted, he was running against a guy who was campaigning from prison where he'd been convicted of corruption. In Brazil, you can still campaign from prison. I just find that hilarious. Now, this guy is in league with the agriculturalists of Brazil, so expect the regulatory burden and expect a lot more slashing and clearing to happen in the rainforests as they finally have a friend in power. But if you combine the inequality of the system, and we're just on the verge of a global capital crunch, and there's only one road that takes all this stuff to market, this is how social revolutions happen. And since only one road takes it all, you only have to cut one road for Brazil to cease being an agricultural exporter. We are in the final years of you facing Brazil as a competitor.